There is something I keep coming back to when I look at this World Cup. And it is not the football. 104 matches. 48 teams. The biggest tournament in the history of the sport. That part is real. That part is coming. What I keep coming back to is something quieter. Something that has been building for months, that most people covering this tournament have not fully said out loud. The 2026 World Cup was sold to the world as America's World Cup. America's stadiums. America's energy. America's moment to finally fall in love with football on the world's biggest stage. And that is the version FIFA put in every press release. That is the version Gianni Infantino described in every speech. But there is a different version of events emerging right now, one that the numbers, the hotel data, and the visa records are telling on their own. And that version says something far more interesting. Canada and Mexico are not supporting this World Cup. They are rescuing it. The official argument has always been straightforward. The United States is the largest economy on the planet. It has 12 of the 16 host cities. It will host 78 of the 104 matches, including every knockout game from the quarterfinals onward, the 2 semifinals, and the final at MetLife Stadium in New Jersey. The logic was simple. Put the biggest tournament in the biggest market, and the revenues take care of themselves. And look, the argument is not without merit. The American television deal is enormous. The sponsorship numbers are real. The infrastructure exists. The stadiums are there. But there is a significant difference between a country being capable of hosting a World Cup and a country being capable of hosting this World Cup, in this political moment, with these immigration policies, with this particular relationship to the rest of the world. And that difference is where the story begins. Let's start with a number that should have generated far more headlines than it did. 2 days before the opening whistle, hotel analytics firm CoStar published city-by-city occupancy data for all 14 measurable host cities during match days. The results were not subtle. Vancouver, 48% occupancy. Guadalajara, 48%. Toronto, above 40%. Mexico City, above 40%. Monterrey, above 40%. And the United States. Of all 12 American host cities, only one, San Francisco, crossed the 40% threshold. At 44%. Dallas, Miami, Atlanta, Philadelphia, Boston, New York, below 40%. Every single one. Think about what that means for a moment. The country hosting 78 of 104 matches, the country that was supposed to be the engine of this entire tournament, is being outperformed on hotel bookings by its 2 smaller co-hosts. Not by a small margin. Structurally. Systematically. Across every major city. This is not a bad week of bookings. This is not a rounding error. That is not a hospitality problem. That is an entry problem. And entry is something the United States government, not FIFA, controls. 48 nations bringing their absolute best talent to North America. The 2026 tournament is set to be an event of staggering scale. By every traditional metric, it will succeed. The stadiums will fill, the television numbers will be real, and revenue will hit projection. But those metrics obscure a fracture in the tournament's foundation. Off the pitch, a massive logistical failure is breaking the agreement that made this possible. When the matches start, the brilliant goals and the push these administrative problems off to front pages. The spectacle will hide the cracks holding the event together. To understand those cracks, we have to look back to 2018. The pitch was called the United Bid, an agreement between the United States, Canada, and Mexico to act as a single, seamless host entity. Embedded in those original bid documents was a vital guarantee: unhindered fan movement and equal entry access across all 3 nations. FIFA heavily weighted their decision on this promise of a functionally borderless North American partnership. United was an operational contract. Now, that contract is failing. Current United States immigration policies have made travel functionally impossible for supporters from dozens of participating nations. Across Africa, Asia, and South America, the entry process is simply too uncertain. The restrictions reach all the way to the officials on the pitch. In one documented case, a highly qualified Somali referee selected for the tournament was abruptly turned back at the U.S. border. This creates what the hospitality industry calls booking attrition. Thousands of fans from the global south who initially bought match tickets are abandoning their travel plans entirely. Major southern markets are feeling the immediate impact. Miami, with its expansive event spaces, is missing out on the influx of international tourists those initial ticket sales promised. Dallas, another massive American hub with vast infrastructure, is seeing the exact same gap. The global fans who were supposed to fill these cities chose to stay home. Domestic fans will eventually buy those empty seats, and the stadiums will look full on television. But the absence of those international travelers is a real, measurable void. While the United States tightens its borders, Canada and Mexico are quietly fulfilling their end of the partnership. This chart shows international hotel bookings across North American host cities. It reveals a massive spike in Canadian markets, proving a clear shift in global attendance toward the co-hosts. When we isolate the Vancouver data, the numbers show it outperforming every single American host city. The diverse international atmosphere that defines this tournament has essentially relocated north. Mexico is carrying a similar weight, providing the vibrant, welcoming environment that international fans expect when they travel for the sport. By maintaining their entry commitments, Canada and Mexico have become the functional hosts for the international fans the US excluded. This raises an uncomfortable question. What is a co-hosting arrangement actually worth if one partner's sovereign policies actively work against the event? It is a question nobody at FIFA has answered directly, and executives categorically refuse to address the contradiction while the tournament is underway. The idealistic promises signed on paper in 2018 have collided with the concrete reality of structurally isolated American venues. You cannot build a global event on a foundation that treats national borders as someone else's problem. The booking data and the denied visas of 2026 are writing a permanent warning for all future bids. The next set of bid documents will undoubtedly require explicit clauses regarding entry access and the logistical requirement that fans can actually get to the stadiums. Global governing bodies must decide whether those clauses have real teeth or if they remain mere suggestions. The on-pitch heroics will still be played, but the administrative record of 2026 will reflect a tournament physically divided by the borders it promised to ignore. Sooner or later, the borders become the tournament. A global tournament requires the world to be able to reach the stadium. In June 2026, the World Cup expanded across North America, projected to draw global audiences in the billions, to massive stadiums across 3 countries. FIFA marketed this as a 48-team spectacle, representing football for everyone, the most open tournament in the history of the sport. Players from these 4 nations earned their places through years of qualification, yet the supporters who followed them were legally barred from the stadiums. The foundational promise of an open, international tournament was structurally broken before the first match began. As the tournament began, FIFA had provided no public clarity on how fans from banned countries were expected to navigate the situation. The proposed solution involved moving affected matches to Canada or Mexico, where the American travel bans do not apply. Canada and Mexico became the alternative by default, relying on their functional processing times and open border policies to accommodate the changes. The co-hosting arrangement functioned as a pressure valve, absorbing the logistical and political complications the primary host could not handle. For fans in countries not subject to outright bans, the hurdle shifted from policy to bureaucracy. U.S. visa interview wait times were extraordinary. Mexico City reached 878 days, Guadalajara hit 820, Bogota stood at 685, and Panama City required 477. Measured in 2025, fans were mathematically unable to obtain a visa in time for the June 2026 kickoff. The U.S. State Department instructed fans to apply early, noting there was no requirement to have already purchased a match ticket. This directive required fans to plan for a systemic delay that the host nation refused to officially recognize as a problem. Beyond the data, the rigid border policy directly impacted the professionals selected to run the games. Omar Abdul Qadir Artan, a Somali referee, was selected by FIFA to officiate at the World Cup, the highest assignment in his career. Artan was refused entry to the United States. FIFA admitted it had no authority over host government immigration decisions, effectively ending his tournament before it began. Similar documentation issues at the Mexican border delayed the departure of the South African squad for the tournament's opening match in Mexico City. In a tournament marketed as a celebration of crossing borders, the borders themselves became the defining operational story. The structural weight of the tournament shifted toward the secondary hosts, who were tasked with managing the spillover from the American border. This graph compares host performance using FIFA's internal data, showing Canada and Mexico outperforming the United States on every hospitality metric. This deficit reflects the difficulty the primary host faced generating the operational atmosphere and processing efficiency found in neighboring countries. A World Cup built around the American market relied on its supporting cast to maintain the functionality of its early stages. Canada and Mexico provided the hospitality and atmosphere that American cities struggled to generate under the weight of restrictive border policies. While the United States struggled with its own unyielding visa systems, its neighbors absorbed the relocated concerns of the tournament. The World Cup positioned the United States as its foundation, only to find the tournament operational stability resting on Canada and Mexico all along.